Hey guys, what is going on? It's me, BakuriBox12 here, and welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God Dungeon Guide video. In fact, a remake of the very first dungeon guide I ever made, the Snake Pit. This is kind of a big deal. Sentimental value aside, the decision to reconstruct older content, both visually and mechanically, is an ongoing event that could seriously reshape how Realm is played. These aren't just light cosmetic changes for the sake of being modernized. Entirely new gameplay concepts are being utilized here, and the difficulty scaling has been fine-tuned to be more beginner accessible. The Snake Pit has a chance of dropping from the Lizard God, Undead Dwarf God, Ogre King, Medusa, and is a guaranteed drop from the Lucky Medusa, which is a new theme that the Godlands follows. What we have here are temple ruins of a sort. Brown tiles all across the floor and walls, sometimes cracked, vines and torches on the wall, the occasional face, pillars in central rooms, vents that are a lot more inconspicuous now, jars and green sprouts, and my favorite new addition, the various statues of different snakes in the game. They don't even have to be related to the Snake Pit. This all makes sense when you read that the Snake Pit was previously a temple used long ago by church leaders for communion with the gods. Left to rot when Oryx took over, hundreds of serpents throughout the realm took refuge in the cracked stone walls. In between each room, there's a breakable wall of dirt that you can attempt to clear out strategically. The enemies can't move through single tile wide gaps. So if you're rushing and you don't want things catching up to you, you can dig your way through one line of blocks. You can also carve out a small groove that'll keep you guarded on both sides. And if you're a wizard, you can spellbomb everything at no additional risk. Spellbombs in general give quite the advantage this time around. So many big targets will be standing still far enough away that they won't see you, but still in range of your own vision even over a wall. The enemy types are the same as before, with new sprites reminiscent of the old, but with a few alterations in behavior. In the rooms that have vents or grates, tiny pit snakes and pit vipers will spawn in like they always have. Since they only have 5 HP, clearing them out is a mere few left clicks away, but they will continue to respawn infinitely, so it's best to not needlessly stick around. That being said, I highly recommend you wear a defense ring, as it'll lower their damage down to their minimum. With only 9 defense, which you can get with a tier 9 robe, the pit snake's 10 damage is reduced to 1, and at 17 defense, thanks to an exalted ring, the pit vipers went from 11 damage to 3. That's a significant drop in DPS, and so long as you don't sit still taking it all at once, your vitality, even at 20, will be enough to compensate any health lost. Melees have a bit of an edge in this regard. The tier 9 dragon scale heavy armor gives 20 defense on its own. You don't even need a defense ring at that point. You can invest in health or even vitality to further boost that regeneration. This means you can focus on the bigger targets when entering a room and ignore the small fry. Like the pythons, for instance. They're the only enemies that come after you. Everything else stays in its own room. For this reason, I would advise clearing out the dirt pathways completely so you can lure them out. The brown python is dead set on hunting you down, as it never stops chasing with a rapid-fire single blue shot. Now, with only 200 HP, you'll likely kill it before it can even start moving, but dragging or circling it is just as viable. If you sit still, it'll circle you, hitting every one of its 30 damage shots. Fire pythons have burst aggression. They stay in place for a moment before lunging towards you, letting out a wavy quad shot every so often. But again, you can just back up and step to the side to easily dodge it. Only by sitting completely still or rushing into the next room with one right in your face will you actually get hit by this. And even then, at most, you'll take 140 damage. A substantial amount, but nothing you can't recover from. Yellow pythons hide out in the back of the group and send out 3 separate shots in a fan shape. I find it easier to rotate into the shots than against them, but that's a matter of preference. Finally, we have the greater pit snakes and greater pit vipers, which used to be very threatening encounters for unmaxed characters since they would often group up and block the entrance. But now they've been relegated to borderline mini-boss status. You'll only ever see one at a time, and they always stay in the center of the room with a continuous burst AoE around its body, a regular bullet attack, and a grenade about every second. The snakes will shoot in a random cardinal direction while chucking grenades right at you, while the vipers will shoot in your direction with a big V-shot spread and throw grenades in a random direction, so they sort of mirror the other one's behavior. Circling is the name of the game, and in the viper's case, you have to be looking ahead to see if it decides to throw a grenade right in front of you, at which point you'll need to briefly halt or slow your pace to let that pass. However, despite this reduction in enemy quantity, they have retained their 500 HP, meaning you can waltz in there and blast them away in a couple seconds. Like I said earlier, in the wizard's case, you can spellbomb them a mile away, and knights can stun them if you want to take the melee approach. This one change single-handedly makes the Snake Pit the easiest and most beginner-friendly it's ever been. When I started gathering footage, I treated it just as I did over 5 years ago. But once I saw how little damage I was taking, I realized I could rush the whole thing without putting my well-being in any sort of danger. And I'm not playing on some high-level character, this is a fresh level 20 wizard with Godlands gear and no pet. Sure, I have 9 years worth of game sense built up, but this dungeon functions as if you don't even have 9 hours. The Snake Pit has become an excellent dungeon for players who want to practice rushing without a high risk. At most, you could take 200 damage at one time, and that's highballing it. It's not even enough to put you in the orange. Enemies can even drop snake oil, an AoE healing potion that covers 10 squares. It's a great little consumable that turns you into a mini priest for a moment. The only major concern is if you don't kill any of the enemies chasing you, because yes, that can stack up if you have to backpedal and 4 or 5 pythons are right on your tail. That is a genuinely troublesome scenario, but also a completely avoidable one. Breaking 1 tile wide gaps in the dirt fully prevents this, or just making sure they're dead. Where the Snake Pit's true danger lies is in its boss fights. On a sheer random occurrence, you may stumble upon a treasure room. You'll know it when you see it because it always starts with a small square room, a skinny hallway with pillars, a wider rectangular room with a big grate in the middle and 3 snake stones on each side, and an even smaller room at the very end with a switch. Turn the camera around for when you press it because the Snake Pit guard and booby-trapped wall arrows will activate. There are a few things you can do here. If you stay in the switch room, the guard won't be drawn to you, so you can attack him at a relatively safe distance, only needing to dodge a couple bullets down the middle, and the one stray snake vent behind you. But once he reaches close to half health, he'll flash blue and return to the middle. You need to take that time to get out of there immediately. Head to the nearest corner outside of that room because the guard has a new attack, rushing up and down the hall firing 9 daze shots. By being in this corner, the darts and red grenades can't hit you, and the big orange ball is an easy dodge. The only thing that you will get hit by is this one stray orange bullet. It's a very tight window, I wouldn't count on dodging it, but since the guard only has 7,500 HP, you probably won't take any more than 1 or 2 of these before you've already won. Alternatively, after pressing the switch, you can book it to the entrance and fight him from the outside. He won't really be able to do anything here. You'll still have to dodge a few attacks like the triple spread and AoEs, but he can't go too far out of the main hall before rubber banding back in. And when phase 2 happens, you can steer clear of the entrance while those dazing stars go by and wait for him to come back. You can even do the same corner strat just on the opposite side. It's very possible that you won't even have to cower in that first phase. You'll have enough DPS to push him to phase 2 before he gets too close. All in all, I've always loved this treasure room for being exactly that. A surprise encounter with a cool room and a fun fight that's about half as difficult as the actual boss, dropping all the same loot acting as a bonus reward. And it's in the best shape it's ever been thanks to this update. There can be more than one in the same dungeon too. I'm not sure what the maximum is, I know 2 or 3 is somewhat common, but there used to be reports of up to 5. I just don't know if that translates to the new version. In any case, it's time we discuss the real boss, Steno, the Snake Queen, a purple Medusa with 2 trusty daggers. Her residence is by far the largest part of the Snake Pit, and there will always be exactly 5 rooms in between her and the spawn. So if you see that you've already crossed more than 5 rooms on the map and you still haven't reached her, you're going the wrong way. I'd still recommend clearing the whole thing to look for T rooms, which are always facing upright, but if you're in a hurry, that's the best information you can use. She sits in the very center of the room, as any good boss does, with 4 barricades around her that I used to use for cover back in the day, but now I don't think it's necessary at all. When you cross one of these barriers, she'll activate, sending out 4 Steno pets to circle the outer rim of the fight to box you in. They emit a slowing stream of orbs, but if you get left out or are too scared to go in, fear not, for a wizard can spellbomb about 20% of her health with a full bar of mana. She's even sometimes within staff range without you needing to cross that line of pets. But for the sake of argument, let's say you're fighting her as intended. Her first phase is actually her most dangerous in my opinion. It took me several attempts to understand how it worked. She sends out 4 directions of dagger pairs, 2 bullets side by side in an X shape, but not aimed at you. It's actually designed to go around. That is until she does a burst of single projectiles in a circle, which will often go right for you. But her frequency of attacks is random. There's no rhyme or reason to how many pairs or single shots she'll put out, so trying to follow her visual cues will honestly confuse you more than help. You'll likely end up stepping into a dagger stream on accident, knee-jerk react into another one, and then get scared into backing out or nexusing because they do 90 damage. Simultaneously, she's also throwing out 100 damage grenades onto your current position, so circling is mandatory. But there's a trick to it. It's all about micro movements. Never stand too close to the stream you're gonna be rotating towards. Leave enough room there to move into while the attack is happening, and keep nudging in that direction every half second. The further you are from the queen, the more time you'll have, but if you're up close, the quick movements are necessary. She'll send out 3 swarms in every phase, but they'll often go right past you, or you can gun them down in a second if they're blocking you. There's no point in killing the pets either, she'll immediately respawn them. But they will do this jab if you get close to the outer circle. It's not gonna get you unless you stand really close to the edge, so it's mainly a scare tactic. After this, she begins phase 2, and congratulations, you've made it past the hardest part of the fight and are now entering the easiest part. The grenade phase. Steno sends out 7 waves of 8 grenades in the same pattern every time relative to your position. The way to avoid these consistently is to look for the triangle. If you spot any 3 points and stand in the middle, you'll never get hit. It's a really good way of teaching newer players how these AoE attacks work because the final boss of the game, Oryx 3, uses these same methods among many others. The most efficient stance for this phase is actually to stand at point blank. AoEs don't hurt you until they land, and Steno won't fire them directly on top of her, so the safest method is to coddle the Snake Queen because she can't do anything about it. And more often than not, this will be the end of the fight. It bears repeating, I'm using an unmaxed wizard, and she couldn't survive halfway through phase 2. So if you're a priest with a fire wand, you'll enter the final phase. The method of dodging used here is quite similar to the first, although I find it much easier since it is fully consistent. All you have to do is follow the gap in between the purple blinding orbs. AoEs are still coming your way, so rotation is back in the regimen, but like I said, the path is always clear, it's just a matter of keeping up. Since Steno is usually off-center, it can start to look a little cramped in the direction you're headed the closer you get to her. At any point in time, you can switch directions after waiting for the last AoE on whatever side you plan to move to detonate. That way you won't run into it on accident and you can cross over with ease. It only lasts for 8 seconds too, so it's hardly an endurance round, and despite the fact that you're being circled the whole time by slowing snake orbs, you can back out any time. 1 or 2 75 damage orbs are not gonna kill you. Steno herself drops a speed potion, a critical element in evasion, permanently increasing your movement speed. There's also the high tier armors and weapons, the snakeskin armor and shield, which aren't great, but are better than the lower tiers. The snake eye ring, which is now better than ever, giving you a 2-second speedy bonus upon ability activation. The acidic armor of the Assassin ST set, and our 2 white bags. The wand of the Bulwark, a situationally strong wand that used to be one of the rarest items in the game, but is now appropriately not. And the Snake Charmer Pungi, a speedy and defense-boosting loot for the Bard. Neither of these items are especially amazing, but Bulwark in particular is a classic item that can be fun to mess around with. And this is a lower tier dungeon, so it makes sense to not have too good of a drop. The Snake Pit Guard will also drop a speed potion and can even drop the white bags. It also contains another part of the acidified Assassin ST set. Overall, I'm very impressed with this rework. I think that more than ever, the Snake Pit is a dungeon that new players can learn from. I do think it's a bit on the easy side in regards to how little health everything has. You don't even have to fight most enemies before they've already died, mainly in reference to the greater pit snakes and vipers. Aside from that, the bosses are smart, the dungeon looks great, and it's still the #1 source of speed. Give it a shot as soon as you can. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, don't forget to check out the next episode whenever I post it, which will probably be soon. Alright. See ya.